The materialist is following amassing wealth. The narcissist is living for myself, self-worship. The hedonist is living for stimulating their nerve endings. The careerist is living to climb the corporate ladder.
You advocate having a rational basis for our beliefs, correct?
I am advocating that if you have irrational basis for your belief, you're making a big mistake.
Right, okay. And I agree with your premise that it is beyond our current understanding how there could be an effect without a cause. For instance, the Big Bang that you mentioned, and then life from no life, which you just mentioned. But I would like to know the rational thought process that you went through to go from just something beyond our understanding to the theistic God of whatever brand of Christianity you seem to subscribe to.
You bet. Great question. I like the way you think. The evidence of the order and design around me points to an intelligent designer. The evidence of the Big Bang points me to an uncaused cause who caused the Big Bang to occur. The evidence of life coming from life, not coming from non-life, points me to a living, intelligent designer. That is God. But the next obvious difficult question is, who is this God? What is this God like? And that's where I hit a brick wall. I'm not smart enough to figure out God. But wait a second. Watch this. Hi, my name's Cliff. What's your name? Ann?
Kaylin.
Mary?
Kaylin.
Suzanne. Okay, now wait a second. What am I doing? Not only am I being rude to this woman, but I'm also being incredibly arrogant. I am claiming to know her name better than she does. That's a lie. In order for me to get to know Kaylin, I have to have the humility to allow Kaylin to reveal to me her name. Well, if that's true between Kaylin and me, how much more true that is between God and me.
In the dialogue above, the two speakers present the argument that human worldviews often revolve around ultimate commitments, and that moving from mystery to belief in God requires rational justification. And I find this line of reasoning to be largely sound. The speaker begins by mapping out several secular life orientations: materialism, narcissism, hedonism, and careerism, not as caricatures, but as examples of what people functionally live for. This framing is effective because it exposes a shared assumption. Everyone organizes life around something ultimate, whether they acknowledge it or not. In that sense, belief itself is unavoidable. The challenge raised by the questioner is legitimate and philosophically necessary. He does not deny mystery. Rather, he presses the crucial transition point: how one moves from acknowledging unexplained phenomena to affirming a specific theistic conclusion. This prevents the discussion from collapsing into a mere God of the gaps argument. The response offered avoids that trap by appealing to cumulative inference rather than blind assertion. Order, causality, and the origin of life are not presented as proofs in isolation, but as converging indicators pointing toward an intelligent source. One may debate whether these indicators compel belief, but they are undeniably rational considerations, not arbitrary leaps. The illustration involving personal names is rhetorically strong. It highlights an epistemological humility often missing in debates about God. If personal knowledge requires self-revelation even between humans, then knowledge of God would likewise depend on God's initiative. This does not prove revelation has occurred, but it establishes why revelation would be necessary if God exists. Overall, this segment successfully reframes belief in God as neither irrational nor arrogant, but as a reasoned response to evidence combined with epistemic humility. The argument does not yet establish which God is true, but it properly defines the criteria by which such a claim must be evaluated. We now continue together into the next part of the debate and discussion.
If I'm going to get to know God, God's going to have to open up and reveal who God is, what God's name is, what God is like. That's where Jesus Christ, Muhammad, the avatars of Hinduism, fill the gap. They claim to be revealing God accurately, but they contradict each other. Because they contradict each other, I'm convinced they all can't be equally valid. So I've got to start looking for evidence to support the trustworthiness of Muhammad, the avatars of Hinduism, Jesus Christ, Shirley MacLaine, or whoever. I have reached the point of trusting Christ to reveal God accurately, to reveal God's name, God's character, the way to heaven, because the historical evidence of the way Jesus lived, taught, died, and rose from the dead points to Jesus being reliable. And the reason I don't trust Muhammad, the reason I don't trust the avatars of Hinduism, the reason I don't trust Shirley MacLaine is because I am convinced the evidence is they are not ultimately reliable. Does that make sense? Thank you so much for raising that question.
I have another question.
Yes, sir.
Your solution for the problems of the world and acceptance or in submission to Jesus
Yes.
and your God, that sounds good, but that creates problems for those that don't think that submission to any authority is how they want to attain their happiness.
You bet. Okay. You're right. That's our fundamental problem with Jesus. Our fundamental problem with Jesus is I don't want to submit to anybody's authority.
In the dialogue above, the two speakers present the argument that if God exists and is personal, knowledge of God must come through self-revelation, and that competing religious claims must be evaluated by evidence. And I find this argument to be largely correct. This section marks a critical intellectual pivot. The speaker moves from abstract theism to the concrete problem of religious plurality. His claim is not that all religions are false, but that mutually contradictory revelations cannot all be equally true. This is not a theological prejudice. It is a basic logical principle. Importantly, the speaker does not ask for blind loyalty. He explicitly places all claimants, Jesus, Muhammad, Hindu avatars, and others, under the same evidentiary standard. This undercuts the common accusation that Christianity demands special pleading. The method is comparative, not sectarian. The appeal to historical evidence as the basis for trust is also significant. Rather than grounding belief in private experience or cultural inheritance, the argument rests on publicly accessible data, actions, teachings, death, and the claim of resurrection. Whether one ultimately agrees or not, this is a rational framework for belief formation. The questioner's objection introduces a deeper existential concern, submission itself. This is not merely about evidence, but about autonomy. The resistance to authority is framed as a pursuit of happiness, a theme that will dominate the remainder of the discussion. The respondent's acknowledgement, "You're right," is not a concession of error, but a diagnosis. He identifies the conflict with Jesus not primarily as an intellectual failure, but as a volitional one. This reframing is sharp because it exposes that disagreement may persist even when evidence is sufficient, due to resistance at the level of the will. We now continue together into the next part of the debate and discussion.
But sir, if you don't learn to submit to another person, you're going to have a horrible marriage, a horrible family. You're going to be bounced out of your society. Submission is one of the key ways to get along with others.
I agree, but I think that's more of a partnership rather than submission.
Okay, you're a good point. All right, that's a partnership. But when I'm traveling down the highway and it says 55, that's not a partnership because I want to go 75.
Well, it's in agreement with society.
Okay.
You can go 75, but then you will be thrown out or put
Exactly.
away.
So I'm going to have to learn to submit to authority. And I'll tell you, April 15th is one of the most painful days of the year for me. It's tax time. And I don't want to pay taxes to the federal government or to the state government. But I had better learn to submit to the government's authority and pay my taxes, otherwise I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. You see, sir, we're going to have to learn to submit to authority in order to live together. If we don't learn to submit to authority, we ain't going to live together. We're all going to be anarchists. Now, if God is real, we better learn to submit to God. He's the one who created us. He's going to be our judge. We better learn to submit to him, otherwise we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
In the dialogue above, the two speakers present the argument that submission to authority is not the enemy of human freedom, but a necessary condition for social life. And I find this argument to be fundamentally sound. This segment forcefully dismantles the romantic idea that freedom means the absence of authority. The respondent does not defend blind obedience. Instead, he grounds submission in lived reality. Marriage, family, law, and civil society all function because individuals voluntarily limit their autonomy for a greater good. The attempt to reframe submission as partnership is partially correct, but incomplete. Partnerships themselves operate within agreed rules. The highway speed limit analogy exposes this limitation clearly. One may disagree with the rule, but participation in society entails compliance or consequence. Authority is not negated by consent. It is structured by it. The tax example is particularly effective because it removes abstraction. No one enjoys paying taxes, yet most recognize that refusing to do so undermines shared order. Submission here is pragmatic, not ideological, a concession to reality rather than a surrender of dignity. The phrase, "my own God," reveals the philosophical core of the objection. Absolute autonomy ultimately results in self-deification, where the individual becomes the final moral authority. The argument rightly points out that such a posture is incompatible with communal life. The final move, extending this logic to God, is internally consistent. If authority is unavoidable in every meaningful human structure, then rejecting divine authority, assuming God exists, is not a liberation but an anomaly. The argument does not yet prove God's existence, but it successfully shows that submission itself cannot be dismissed as inherently oppressive. We now continue together into the next part of the debate and discussion.
But then it almost seems like you're advocating following the way or submission in order to serve your own best interest, rather than out of some absolute need to do so.
You bet. I am not sure that you're a student here because you love to study. I think a lot of you are students here who, although you hate to study, realize that in order for you to have the best future possible, you better get a college diploma living in this culture. I don't call that unadulterated self-centeredness. I call that affirming the value of your life, wanting to provide a good future for your family, for you. So I can promise you, I believe in Jesus Christ partially because I affirm life. I hate death. Jesus Christ promises eternal life to all who trust in him. That's not unadulterated self-centeredness on my part. It's an affirmation of life. Why don't you go out and play in traffic on the interstate? The reason I don't go and play in traffic on the interstate is because I don't want to end up on the bumper of a Mack truck. That's not unadulterated selfishness. That's an affirmation of life. I love life. I celebrate life. I don't want to get run over by a Mack truck. Ergo, I don't play in traffic on the interstate.
In the dialogue above, the two speakers present the argument that acting in one's own interest does not necessarily equal selfishness, and that faith may be grounded in an affirmation of life rather than moral corruption. And I find this argument to be correct. This exchange exposes a common but shallow moral accusation, that belief motivated by self-interest is automatically corrupt. The respondent dismantles this by distinguishing self-centeredness from life affirmation. Wanting a good future, avoiding harm, and choosing survival are not ethical failures. They are expressions of valuing life. The college diploma analogy is particularly effective. No one accuses students of moral narcissism for pursuing education to secure a better future. Yet the same logic is often rejected when applied to spiritual decisions. This reveals an inconsistency in moral reasoning rather than a flaw in the argument. The traffic example is philosophically decisive. Avoiding self-destruction is not selfishness. It is rational self-preservation. If refusing to step into traffic is morally acceptable, then seeking eternal life cannot be dismissed as base self-interest without collapsing the very concept of prudence. The respondent's framing of faith as hatred of death rather than fear of punishment is subtle and important. It reframes Christianity not as an escape from consequence, but as a commitment to life itself. This undermines the claim that submission to God is merely transactional or manipulative. Ultimately, this section successfully demonstrates that moral reasoning cannot condemn self-interest wholesale without also condemning wisdom, responsibility, and survival. Faith motivated by love of life is not morally inferior to disbelief motivated by comfort or autonomy. We now continue together into the next part of the debate and discussion.
So this is my last comment.
No, I like your thinking. I love the way you think.
Would probably agree if I said that if the Jesus that you believe in, was different than what you think of him as, then you could not guarantee that your opinion of him would be the same.
Very, very well put. If in reality Jesus Christ was a sexist, chauvinistic pig who abused women, I would never put my faith in him. If Jesus Christ went around abusing kids, I never would put my faith in him. If Jesus Christ had not risen from the dead, if he'd stayed dead, I would not believe in him. You're absolutely correct. Oh, Cliff, you're claiming to understand truth. Yes, I am claiming that God has given all of us rational minds, and we can use those minds to get in touch with truth. What do you think science is? It's getting in touch with material, physical truth. What do you think logic is? It's getting in touch with logical truth. What do you think history is? It's getting in touch with what really happened in the past. And what do you think faith in Christ is? It's getting in touch with God.
In the dialogue above, the two speakers present the argument that belief in Jesus is conditional upon truth and character, and that faith operates within the same truth-seeking framework as science and logic, and I find this argument to be valid. This exchange decisively refutes the caricature that Christian faith is immune to evidence or moral evaluation. The respondent explicitly states that his belief is falsifiable. If Jesus were morally corrupt or historically false, belief would be unjustified. This is not blind faith. It is conditional trust grounded in reality. The question about claiming to understand truth exposes a deeper epistemological issue. The response does not claim omniscience, but affirms the human capacity to access truth through reason. This aligns faith with other truth-seeking disciplines rather than isolating it as an irrational exception. By placing science, logic, history, and faith on a single epistemic continuum, the argument dismantles the false dichotomy between reason and belief. Each domain seeks a different category of truth, but all rely on rational inference, evidence, and coherence. Faith, as defined here, is not belief without evidence, but belief in response to evidence appropriate to its subject matter. This reframing is crucial because it challenges the assumption that skepticism is inherently more rational than belief. Overall, this segment successfully anchors Christian faith within a robust philosophy of knowledge, where belief is accountable to truth rather than protected from it. We now continue together into the next part of the debate and discussion.
Is there an ability to be happy without having to believe in something? Just believing in yourself, living your everyday life, and enjoying the simple pleasures that there are without a God.
It is possible to be a happy atheist. It is possible to be a happy agnostic. And so I don't know if God exists or not. It's possible, if you don't think too deeply. But if you think deeply, like Camus, Sartre, Nietzsche, Bertrand Russell, it's impossible. Why? If you think deeply, meaning by that, asking the fundamental human questions. What's the purpose of my life? Why do I treat people the way I do? What about death? Is there life after death or is there not?
Well, what if you don't need to ask those why questions? What if you are just content with? I believe that you can be a critical, deep thinker without having to ask, what is the purpose of me being here? The purpose is what you do every day and what you change and who you touch, not necessarily what you have to believe in to get there and do those things and what you accomplish.
Ma'am, I wish that you could live that type of life. It's impossible. Because you have to make big decisions every day. You have to decide, in light of the fact that I had this opportunity to get this tremendous education here at the University of Arizona, that puts me in the top 5% of the world population when it comes to education and financial potential. Which means you're either going to make a decision. It's all about my happiness, which means where's the next party? Or it's all about struggling through, how am I going to share my resources with others?
I'm very offended by that because there are way more important things and things that can make us happy in life than parties. And being a college student doesn't necessarily have to mean you have to be a partier for happiness.
In the dialogue above, the two speakers present the argument that while surface-level happiness may be possible without belief in God, deep and sustained reflection on meaning, morality, and death makes such neutrality unstable. And I find this argument to be largely correct. This final exchange confronts the most emotionally charged claim of modern secularism, that happiness does not require belief in anything beyond oneself. The respondent does not deny the existence of happy atheists or agnostics. Instead, he draws a crucial distinction between psychological contentment and existential coherence. The argument hinges on depth. If one refuses to ask foundational questions about purpose, moral obligation, and death, happiness may persist temporarily. But once those questions arise, neutrality becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. Meaning does not remain optional when life forces decisions with irreversible consequences. The attempt to redefine purpose as daily action rather than ultimate explanation is emotionally appealing but philosophically thin. Action presupposes value, and value presupposes a standard. Without addressing where that standard originates, the argument avoids rather than resolves the question of meaning. The respondent's emphasis on decision-making is decisive. Education, opportunity, sacrifice, and long-term planning all assume that life has enduring significance beyond momentary pleasure. These assumptions implicitly rely on a worldview, whether acknowledged or not. Thus, the claim is not that unbelievers cannot live moral or impactful lives, but that they inevitably borrow moral and existential capital from deeper frameworks they publicly deny. Happiness without belief may exist, but it remains fragile and philosophically ungrounded when examined closely. Across the entire discussion, a consistent thread emerges. Neutrality is an illusion. Whether through materialism, autonomy, pleasure, career, or faith, every person structures life around something treated as ultimate. The disagreement is not about belief itself, but about the reliability of its object. The defender of Christian belief does not argue for faith through emotional coercion or blind submission. Instead, he builds a cumulative case grounded in rational inference, historical evidence, moral realism, and lived human experience. His faith is presented as conditional, falsifiable, and accountable to truth. The objections raised are serious and philosophically respectable. Autonomy, happiness, and freedom are not trivial concerns. Yet the dialogue exposes that rejecting divine authority does not eliminate authority. It merely relocates it to the self. Likewise, rejecting transcendent meaning does not erase moral obligation. It leaves it unexplained. The sharpest insight of the entire exchange is this: resistance to belief often persists not because evidence is absent, but because submission is costly. Christianity is challenging not primarily because it is irrational, but because it confronts human autonomy at its deepest level. This conversation does not end with coercion or certainty, but with clarity. It invites the listener to examine not only what they believe, but why, and whether their worldview can bear the full weight of life, death, meaning, and truth.